What's up, my dude? So I've been seeing this little interest in kind of the community and comments and things like that about this whole, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross replica stuff for MX versus ATV Legends. So I wanted to come in here and make a little video on this just to kind of talk about this a little bit, what I think they're going to do with it and what I think they should do with it, things like that. I'm playing this gameplay live while I'm trying to talk here, so bear with the old Spency boy a little bit. Been a minute since I played any All Out. Man, this game's physics is just something. It's like no other, but it's not necessarily the best. Like, you know what I mean? It's just kind of it's got its own different feeling that I don't know. It's weird. Like, just a bizarre physics system to a motocross game, but like it's super free, very, very free physics system. Just, man, I think if they would have just tweaked the core of this physics just a little bit better in a couple of areas, it could have been really good. Like, when they were first developing this physics system, I know they changed a little bit with the updates and stuff, but like, I don't feel like this is super far off, but it kind of feels that way in a sense just because certain elements of it are, like, kind of get into that, floaty physics, kind of bouncy, jumpy, do 300 backflips over a 10-foot, kind of just gets into that realm of super arcade fantasy feel. If they would have toned that down a little bit and kind of tweaked it in a way to where it kept it a little bit more down the realism vein, I think this game could, MX vs. ATV All Out, could have had a lot more potential to it. But nonetheless, let's talk about what this video is all about. So I think for sure that Legends is going to come out with Lucas Oil Pro Motocross DLC tracks. Like, you're not going to have to pay for them as paid DLC. Certainly not when the game first comes out. Like, whatever kind of... I think they're going to have, like, Replica Pro Motocross tracks in Legends when it very first comes out. I really do believe that at this point. Whether that's, like, the 2021 replicas or the... Depending on when they come out with the game, it's going to all, I know there's been some dudes commenting, like, maybe they'll come out with Legends sometime in the summer of 2022. And then if they have, like, Replica Pro Motocross tracks in it and come out with the game around the real-life Pro Motocross racing, that would be the best timing, wouldn't it? That's kind of what they do with the official Supercross games, right? Man, I'm all over the place on this track. I apologize. It takes a minute to get back used to this physics system here. But you know what I mean? It would make sense for it to all kind of come out that way, wouldn't it? Interesting when you start thinking of it like that. But you guys know with MX vs. ATV All Out, the Lucas Oil Pro Motocross was all DLC for the game. It was all paid DLC. Like, you didn't get any of this just in the base version of All Out, which was actually a tragedy because yes, it's the most amazing DLC you could ever have in a motocross game. I mean, Replica Lucas Oil Pro Motocross DLC, like, come on, bruh. That's as good of DLC as you could ever imagine. My problem with DLC, though, is it splits the community. It splits the fan base. You'll get where Jimmy's got the original Lucas Oil, replica tracks, and Tommy over here's got the 2020 pack, but not the original pack. And then Billy Bob Joe over here doesn't have any of them. You know what I mean? It's like hard to play with your friends if you don't all have the exact same DLC. It kind of gets into that weird splitting community, whereas I feel like if you just have it in the base version of the game, it just makes everything so much better. So hopefully we will actually see that here with, MX vs. ATV Legends. And they've got a chance with Legends, man. I mean, if they can come out with a good set of Lucas Oil Pro Motocross replica motocross tracks and have, like, the standard motocross tracks they would have had in the game and the standard supercross tracks they would have had in the game in combination with a full PC-based track editor, whoo! It's got that potential. It's got that potential. Okay, so here we are on this Loretta Lynn's replica track for MX vs. ATV All Out. I thought this was a super cool thing that they put into this game. I'm supposing that they did that just because it was the actual pro motocross, racing that they did in 2020 with the weird different, I think they did like 3 races at Loretta Lynn's. What the fuck even was that? Now that I think back to that, I'm like, good God almighty, man, that was terrible. The 9 rounds and outdoors and fucking half of them were at Loretta Lynn's. Like, what kind of pro motocross championship even is that, dog? But nonetheless, I don't think they're ever going to do that ever again in Lucas Oil Pro Motocross in real life. But I would still like to see these Loretta Lynn's replicas put into, into Legends. And it kind of goes down that vein of that thought process of like having like amateur tracks, and if you have like a career mode where you can start on 50cc bikes, 85cc bikes, and you got to work your way from Loretta's and maybe like Ponca, Minio, Loretta, and then have like a good set of like 3 amateur replica tracks, and then you have that full-blown Lucas Oil Pro Motocross series in the game as well that you work yourself up into in the career mode of the game. Whoo! You know what I mean? It's got all that kind of potential kind of already laid out for it. It's just a matter of if the developers are smart enough to do that with it. But that's what everybody wants. Because what's happening here is, everybody's wanting this, official Lucas Oil Pro Motocross video game. And the reality of it is, MX vs. ATV basically is the game that owns the rights to that right now. Whereas Milestone owns the rights to the, Monster Energy Supercross and then the MXGP series, whereas MX vs. ATV is the one that owns the rights to the Lucas Oil Pro Motocross series. So they really do, this really is the game that has that potential to be that, motocross legacy, go from an 85 amateur to a full-blown, pro level, pro motocross racer. They got a lot of potential there, even though it's not considered an official pro motocross, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross game or whatever. Like, it's all still there with the bones of it, you know what I mean? It's all still got all that potential to it there, and they could make it work with that. Definitely let me know down in the comments if you want to see MX vs. ATV Legends kind of go down that road, because I think it's just a perfect opportunity for that. You know what I mean? But when it comes to these replica tracks on these Lucas Oil, pro motocross tracks or whatever, I think they could do a lot better of a job with it was cool what they did with All Out, and they've kind of been there and done that, right? So I feel like it's time for us to move on to this. If you could just imagine in your head the stock track motocross tracks on Reflex, the scaling that those tracks had, like the width of the track, the length of the lanes, the jump sizes, all that kind of stuff. Imagine that kind of scaling, but on these Lucas Oil Pro Motocross tracks. If you could just even picture that in your head, that's what I want to see with the Lucas Oil Pro Motocross tracks in Legends. I want to see more of that reflexy stock track scaling put into them. And you can still have that realism, of course, because you make everything bigger. It's still that same replica track. It's just bigger scaling. And I think if they went more down that vein, along with making the physics a little more like Reflex in Legends than they are in All Out, whoo, could you imagine, bro? You know what I mean? That's what I hope to personally see with Legends, because like I say, we've already got this, what you would call more down this one-to-one scaling vein shit with All Out with the replica tracks. I want to see them do a little something different, and the more different they can make it, the less and less it's going to feel like an all-out replica. You know what I mean? The more different they can make those physics and the track designs and scaling, the more different it's going to feel from All Out. And I think that's what everybody wants at this point. I mean, take what you've learned from All Out, but make a different game out of it. You know what I mean? I really feel like that's what everybody wants with Legends. And from that early trailer, it did look like there was some Lucas Oil Pro motocross tracks in Legends. I mean, it literally already looks like that. I don't know if they're planning like a DLC for it, or if it should just be in the base version of Legends. Like MX vs. ATV, you got to be very smart with this. Do not make that paid DLC. Like I say, you've done that with All Out. You need to just put those Lucas Oil Pro Motocross replica tracks in the base version of Legends. You really need to be smart about that. You know what I mean? And yeah, I just think overall, if they'll do that and like come out with a track editor, and man, I mean, there's just so much potential. You're gonna hear me keep saying that in this video, but it's true. There's just so much damn potential if they've upgraded that terrain deformation from what it was from Legends, made a little more like down the reflexy vein of physics and track scaling. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Hopefully, that's all I can say about that. Hopefully they've got their head on straight with that, and we'll see more of that. But yeah, dude. Let me just give you a little example right here, right? Imagine this Southwick replica track right here, okay? In Legends, but it's got the track scaling of Sandwick from Reflex, but it's an exact replication of Southwick of that particular year that they're trying to replicate, but it feels exactly like the scaling of the stock track Sandwick on Reflex, and the deformation on Sandwick of Reflex, but it's actually a replica Southwick. Bruh. Oh, MX vs. ATV. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. We're rooting for you, baby. Come on now. I know you can do it, bruh. I know you can do it, bruh. Oh. You know, that's one of those things that's just like, we'll see. We'll see what they can do. We've not seen too much on Legends yet. I mean, obviously it's going to look similar to All Out. I mean, I don't really have like a big question about that, but man, like I'm saying, it's the groundwork is there. You know, they've already made replica tracks in All Out. They've started to free up the physics in All Out. They've done a lot of good things with this game. It's like it just needs a little bit more of tweaking in every way to get it back to that reflex level. Do you know what I mean? It's like the base of it all is there. It just got to tweak a little more. Make that coming off the jump face whipping a little more fluent, a little more realistic looking. Not so like, watch this right here. Let me get on a bigger jump and I can show you. But and the way the bike reacts over roughness going into a corner, not so bouncy, weird slot car level physics. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of little things like that that they could see how that just doesn't really look real at all. You see how that whip is got like a, even though it's super free, which is good. And like I've always said, I would rather have free and unrealistic than not free at all. But again, it's you know, continuing down that road of tweaking, getting everything more towards like how Reflex was, where it was down the realistic vein, but also like fun factor for an arcade motocross game, freeness to the physics for an arcade motocross game, but not too free to where it starts to feel like a super arcade, unrealistic fantasy. You know what I mean? Reflex has that perfect harmony between realistic, but also fits into what an arcade motocross game is supposed to be. Whereas I feel like with All Out, it feels a little more down the road of not as realistic, more like more fantasy level looking whips and just kind of the way you bounce up in the air doesn't really feel real at all on All Out. I mean, there's just some things to it, you know, that take away from that what made Reflex so great, you know what I mean? And if they can hone all that back in, I mean, everything's there, man. It's all there to make that awesome game. And they could still have some awesome supercross tracks too, you know? They have that ability to make that amazing like Supercross, Motocross, Replica Motocross, all of that shit with good terrain deformation in the same game. They got the potential for every bit of that. It's just, can they do it? You know, can they do it at this point? I don't know, man. I don't know. My sort of theory on it is, like, I think Legends is going to be obviously better than All Out, but I still don't think it's going to be to a Reflex level. I mean, I hate to be that guy right now, but I really don't think it's going to be to that level. It's just so hard to match what Reflex did. It really is. It's so hard to match that combo of, you know, realistic but fantasy at the exact same time. You know what I mean? It's like with Reflex, it's so realistic in a lot of ways, but at the same time, you can ride the bike like you're James Stewart. You know what I mean? It's like a weird combo between those two things. Weird but perfect combo between those two things. And it really starts to make you understand what an arcade motocross game really is at this day and age, you know? I feel like with All Out, this is more down the vein of what arcade motocross games were like in 2004. You know what I mean? With the way, other than the whips, obviously, you got more of a whip feeling to this game than like in Unleashed or Untamed, but as far as the super unrealistic bouncing and floaty and that sort of thing, that's not how modern day arcade motocross gaming is. Like Reflex is just more realistic. And it's not trying to make it a simulator or even an arcade sim hybrid. It's just, even with an arcade game, you know, it's good to have some of that because it keeps you grounded. It keeps you, you know, engaged, invested. You know, you can kind of relate to what's going on more in the game when it has a little bit more of that realism and it's not so down the, you know, whip it like 360 level backwards on every little jump and do 7 backflips on a 4-foot tall jump. You know what I mean? And I think that's part of what kind of hurt All Out in a way. It feels more of like an outdated kind of arcade motocross game feeling than it does like a Reflex or a modern day arcade motocross game physics system to me. So hopefully they can get all that stuff ironed out. I mean, all the groundwork is there. The blueprint is there. It's called Reflex, okay? So the closer and the closer you can get it to Reflex in every way, track scaling, terrain deformation, physics, whip system, scrub system, I mean, literally everything. The closer and the closer you can get it to that, I'm just telling you, it's just a fact. The better and the better your arcade motocross game is gonna be. I'm just telling you. The more and the more you make the tracks like the stock tracks of Reflex, the more and the more you get shit like all of that, it's just going to make your game better at the end of the day. And if you get to the point where you can make something that's like Reflex, then we can start talking about something that you know, making something better than Reflex. But you got to get back to that point where you're even to the level of Reflex before you can talk about making something better. You know what I mean? They still ain't even got anything to the level that Reflex was at this point. I mean, let's not even get into the terrain deformation of the Milestone games. They're not even in the same stratosphere as what Reflex was. But yeah, they're literally going backwards with those MXGP games when it comes to like track scaling and all that. They're not even going the right direction. But hopefully they'll get their stuff with Legends, and I really hope so. But yeah, I mean, even at this point, like, if you got that full-blown PC-based track editor, you're going to have guys like Red Rider and all these other dudes that'll go in there and they'll make these replica tracks for you, you know? And odds are they'll probably make them better than you can make them. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. They've done it for Reflex on PC. They've already done it. They've got the track record. They've got the history. They've done it. You know what I mean? They know how to make pre-made roughness. They know how to make 7 pre-made ruts in a corner and make all that shit work in the physics of the game. They've already done it. So, like, I think you boys should really look into hiring some of these custom track makers for Reflex and some of these guys that's really, you know, spent time on that. I just think it would help you. But nonetheless, man, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. We'll be back on that next one. Later, dudes.